Guys, it is so good to be with you today. Thank you, Alan. And my name is Nathan, if you've never met me, and it's so good to meet you. I got to talk about something before I get into today, though. It is a new season, and I got to talk about the new season coming up. After this series is going to be our Christmas series. So who's gotten their Starbucks already, their Christmas Starbucks? Anybody? The Toasted White Mocha, best coffee of all time. Don't at me, right? It's awesome. But we have a series coming up. It's going to be called Christmas at the Movies. And what Christmas at the Movies is going to be about is a Christmas series geared about looking at Christmas movies. And we're going to do a Christ-like message from these movies. And here's what we want. We want this place to be filled. We want this to be one of the biggest series that we've ever done. And so we're going to advertise about it. And one of the great ways we're going to advertise about it is the Light Up Logansport Parade. Right? Anybody excited for that? Yeah, there you go. I've never been to it. My wife's a Christmas junkie, so we are excited. And we have a life group who has dedicated their time and energy and effort of making a float that we're going to have in the parade. And so the question you may ask is, what can you do? So we need your help as well. What can you do? You can bring candy to give out. We want to give out so much candy. We want, when our float goes by, people are like, man, they got a lot of candy. It's Willy Wonka up in that house, okay? We want all the candy. And so you can bring that candy to the church throughout the week or drop it off on Sunday. You can also sign up to serve, right? One of the things that we believe is a habit of serving is so important in our lives. And so you can sign up to serve in many different ways. If you go to the app, the Next Step tab, or you go on the website, revolutioncc.org, you can find the little Christmas tag and sign up there. And if you can't serve and you don't want to bring candy, at least wear your You Matter shirt to the parade. And when we go by, I want you to go crazy, right? I want you to be like, hey, that's my church. I want people to think those people are crazy, and it's a church, and we want you to do that. So bring candy, sign up to serve, and wear your Matter shirt. And we were going to bring the Christmas season, the Christmas joy to Logansport, maybe like never before. So we're excited for that. But today, we got to talk about some habits. So I want to start off with a question. It's a fun question. When was the last time you got really angry? Think about that. The last time you got really angry. And for some of you, I know how this is. For some of you, your answer was 5 minutes before I got here. All right? And you rode with your family to church, and you guys were all running late, you know, and it's running late even though you got the extra hour of sleep. You guys look better, but you're still running late, right? And so you're fighting, and the kids are arguing, and you hop in the car, and you argue the entire way here. And then you get here, and the door opens, and everybody knows. You just put on your smile, and you go in. Good to see you. How you doing, everybody, right? Even though you fought on the way. Maybe, just maybe, it was with the person you're sitting next to, right? This week, you fought with them. Maybe, I've learned something about you guys. A lot of you cheer for really bad sports teams. So maybe it was watching a sporting event. Or in some of you, it's not watching, it's attending a sporting event, right? You know, kind of lost your temper there. Maybe it was at your boss. Maybe it was on social media. So I want you to think about when the last time you got angry. Think about who it was with, what it was over, but the most important question, whose fault was it? Whose fault was it? Now, I don't know your situation. I don't know your conflict. I don't know when you fought, but I know none of us are as brave as Taylor Swift to say this. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Anybody know that song, Anti-Hero? All right. I can't sing, so I kind of dropped the ball there. But none of us are like, hey, it's my fault. You know, it's just me. I'm the problem all the time. No, most of us are like, hey, I might have overreacted, but you're the problem, right? I might have brought it to a whole nother level, but you started it. And when it comes to anger, most of us have this mindset. If they didn't, then I wouldn't. It's that easy. If you didn't do something I didn't like, then I wouldn't have got angry. Oh, you don't like my tone? Well, I don't like what you did. So if you didn't do what you did, then I didn't have to do what I did. If those Democrats would just knock it off, then I wouldn't. If those Republicans just did this, then I wouldn't. If they just did this, then I wouldn't this happen. If they would just drive faster. If they would just eat quieter. If they would just stop complaining so much. If they would just stop nagging me. If they didn't do something, then I wouldn't. Oh, sure, I brought it to a whole nother level, and I kind of got really upset, but listen, it's not my fault. It's your fault. Because if you didn't do the thing I didn't like, then I wouldn't do it. And for so many of us, that is a defining answer or mindset that we have. Psychologists actually say that this time that we're living in the world right now, it's dubbed something. It's called the age of rage. Everybody say rage. Rage, right? The age of rage, meaning you go on any platform, social media, the news, talk about any topic on anything, everybody's angry all the time, people are angry. And maybe you're angry, right? And I'm not going to judge you, because whenever I talk about topics like this, like words or anger, you know what Whitney says? She's like, awesome, you're going to have a lot of stories to tell today, don't you? So she lets me have it. I sometimes, if I'm real, you don't know me that well, but this conversation was what I needed to have today. Because too many times my defining emotion, when I'm upset, when I'm stressed, when I'm tired and hungry, the tired and hungry combination is deadly, right? When I'm hangry, it's not good. Too many times my go-to emotion is anger. My go-to emotion is rage. And for so many of us, when we're stressed, when we're tired, when we're upset, when things aren't going our way, our go-to emotion is anger or rage. And if anger becomes your immediate response, every time you don't like something, every time you don't get your way, every time somebody says something you don't like, if it's your go-to response, then all of a sudden you realize you've established a habit. When your go-to emotion is anger, you've established a habit. And here's why it's a big deal. God's plans for you, God's plans for your life and your future are too big for you to derail your future by letting anger control you. When we let anger define us, when we let anger be our go-to habit, when we let anger be the leading emotion in our lives, it derails us. How does it derail us? Well, it causes relationship issues. It causes us to do things we don't want to do. It causes us to do things that people we don't want to do them, right? It's like our anger, when our emotion of anger gets the best of us, it derails our future. And God's like, if you just knew what I had planned for your marriage, what I had planned for your future, your career, you would never let anger control you. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about it. Let's just have a real conversation about anger, about how to release anger, what it looks like, why it's in our life, and what to do with it. So let's have a conversation. This is where I'll start. It's okay to get angry. Whoa. I've been told my entire life it's not okay to get angry. I've been told my entire life that I just got to suppress it. No, it's actually okay to get angry. And I didn't just make this up. It wasn't like, oh, Nathan, you're so smart. You just said this, right? No, I found it from a letter Paul wrote that we find in the Bible called Ephesians. And he says this, and don't by letting control you. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, and you should never get angry. He doesn't say you should never get mad. He says, no, listen. In your anger, don't let it control you. In your anger, don't let anger control you. Don't let it lead you to sin. Don't let it lead you to do things you know you're not supposed to do. Don't let it derail you. But there are things in our life that we can get angry about. It's something that someone called righteous anger. That when you look out in the world and you see sex trafficking, and you see poverty, and you see people being mistreated, and you see these things, it should anger you at times. It should have an anger where like, hey, I see a problem and I want to do something about it, right? I want to do something about this anger, and many things that throughout history, women's rights and civil rights movements, all these movements have started with someone had a righteous anger of saying, these things aren't right, I got to do something about it. People, when you look at Jesus' anger, often they go to when he flipped the tables. Jesus didn't just flip the tables because they were doing something he didn't like. It was a righteous anger. They were taking advantage of people. They were cheating people. They were making it hard for people to come to God. And Jesus like, that's it. I'm flipping the table, not because I'm letting it control me, but because I have a righteous anger of not letting people be cheated and make it hard to come to God. There's this righteous anger. But here's the tension. Most of our anger isn't righteous. Most of our anger is personal. It's this type of anger. It's anger used to destroy, to put down, to manipulate. I could probably add intimidate and hurt others. Anger used to destroy, to put down, manipulate, intimidate, and hurt others. That's where most of our anger falls in. That's where most of our anger in our life shows. That's where most of our anger that controls us. And I like to think of it this way. When I'm thinking about this anger, I use this phrase. When anger gets the best of me, it brings out the worst in me. When anger gets the best of me, it brings out the worst in me. Or when anger gets the best of me, it makes a mess in me. So like I said, I got all kinds of stories. I could sit here and tell you stories all day, but I want to tell you one, a defining story in our marriage that we will tell until we're 95, right? And here it is. Years ago, we lived by Cincinnati, and my parents came down, and my youngest brother, loves water parks. So Cincinnati has some indoor water parks, and they're like, hey, can we go? So we decided to go as a family to this indoor water park. And Whitney, my lovely wife over here, she loves to be prepared. And so she packs a lot of stuff at sometimes, right? And it looked like she brought our entire bathroom with us to this water park. And then we get there and you get a locker about this big, right? And they're like, okay, bro, Houdini it up. You got to squeeze everything in there. So we changed, we dressed, got dressed, went to the water park, and we were dunking kids, we were splashing kids, cannonballing all the kids, right? Doing all that stuff. We had fun, we loved it. And the time comes for us to get done. And Whitney says, hey, as you're getting your clothes out, my wedding ring is in that bag. And I hear that. Husbands, you know what I'm talking about. I hear that, but I don't hear that. You get what I'm saying? Like, I hear you. I see your mouth is moving. I hear words coming out of your mouth, but I don't hear you, right? I'm like, I'm just going to go change. So I go to the bathroom, and I change, or locker room. I'm changing. About 27 hours later, Whitney comes out of the girls' locker room. Just kidding, right? I'm going to get in some trouble here, but she comes out of the locker room, and I could tell there's a little bit look of panic on her face. And I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, do you have my wedding ring? I'm like, do I have your wedding ring? Like, why would I have your wedding ring? I got my wedding ring. Like, why would I have yours? She's like, I can't find it. I'm like, you can't find it? Where was it? Like, she's like, I told you it was on top of the clothes. Like, you never said that. Like, no, you didn't. Well, she's like, I can't find it. And I'm getting angry and angry and angry. You know why? Let me tell you a little backstory. I bought that ring, okay? Like a normal story, but in college, I had to work a janitor job. So I'd play basketball, and then after basketball games, I'd have to clean up the stands and clean up the athletic building. So I literally sit on the bench, and I'd watch people dumping popcorn in the stands, and I would get angry because I'm like, I got to clean that up, right? And then I also would have to clean toilets and all that. So I started to tell her, I was like, I spent 95% of all my money to get you this ring. I had no money. I spent all my money to get you this ring. All this money. Do you know how many toilets I scrubbed? Do you know how many kernels of popcorn I swept up to get you this ring? And you can't find it. No, I can't find it anywhere. And we go back and forth, so we start looking for it. About 30 minutes later, we can't find it. Still can't find it. 30 minutes later, I'm mad. Whitney's mad. My family's mad at me. I'm like, Mom, you gave birth to me, and she lost the ring. You're blaming me? Right? So I'm being a jerk to everybody. Everybody sees us. And Whitney's like, hey, we need to go up to the front desk. I'm like, why would you go to the front desk? I said, you see these people? If they find that ring, they're pawning that off somewhere. Like, they're not going to bring it up there. She's like, so we just go up to the front desk. And I put on my preacher voice, act like I'm not mad. Hey, how you doing today? Having a good day? All right, awesome. Hey, by chance, did you find a ring? They're like, yes. And I'm like, this is the moment. I gotcha moment, right? all my righteous anger, it's righteous because she lost the ring that I bought. It's justified. And they said, yes, we did. We found it in the men's locker room. I'm like, what? I was like, Whitney, you went in the men's locker room? Like, what's going on? See, the entire time I had this ring wrapped up in all my clothes. I spent 45 minutes looking like the world's biggest jerk. That's what anger does to us. It brings out the worst in me, it brings out the worst in you. And Paul says, he's like, you can get angry. There's things to get angry about. But don't sin by letting anger control you, right? Then don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. We'll get to that in a moment. But for what? Anger. Everybody say anger. Anger. This is such an important word. Gives a foothold to the devil. This little word, foothold, in the Greek, it literally means location or to make a room. So here's what Paul is saying. Your anger, when you let it control you, when it becomes a defining habit in your life, it is giving a room to Satan freely in your heart, in your life. In your anger, it says, don't give the devil a guest room in your life. If some shady person comes up to your house in the middle of the night, and they walk on your porch and they say, hey, can I have a room? Are you going to let them in? You're like, no, dude, kick rocks. Get off my front porch. Like, I don't know you. But with our anger, we open up the door and say, come on in. Come on in. Sabotage my life as much as you want. See, what anger does is it leaves the door cracked to our lives. It leaves the door cracked to our hearts. And when that door is cracked, and that anger comes in, and Satan gets a little foothold in anger, you think he's going to stop there? You think that's all he wants in your life? Jesus said the enemy came to seek and destroy. He doesn't want to just deal with your anger. He wants your anger to bleed into every other area of your life. He wants that little crack that you're giving him through anger to bleed into so many other areas in your life. And maybe, I don't know, maybe just in our lives, the issues we have in our marriages is because we left the door cracked, and it started with anger. In our parenting, we just left the door cracked. And in other areas, we just left the door cracked. And the thing about leaving the door cracked, you never know what else is coming behind it. It just looks like anger, but he's like, if you let anger just resonate in your life, it is going to leave the door cracked for Satan to do whatever he wants. Now let me talk to these people. Some of you right here is like, whoo, well, I'm glad I don't have any anger. I'm glad I'm just here. I don't have any anger. Like, good. Somebody else needs to hear this. So let me paint a couple scenarios for you. I want you to imagine that it was windy yesterday, right? Internet went out, cable went out, everything went out, right? Power went out. But everything comes back on but your internet. So you decide to call whoever you got internet with, and it's like you hear an automated voice and like, hey, press 1 for this and 2 for this and 3 for this. You're like, I just want to talk to a person. You're like, no, not a choice. Press 3. So you press 3. And then they say, okay, blah, blah, press another button. They say, stay on the line if you want to talk to a real person. And then you're like, finally. And it starts to ring a little bit. And then it says something like this. Your call will be answered in the order it's been received. And apparently it's like 6,786. And you stay on that phone for like 45 minutes, and finally you hear this little click, this little noise. And you think, finally, I'm going to talk to a real human. And it drops your call. You're telling me you're not angry in that moment? Come on. Your granny's angry in that moment. I know it to be true. Or what about this? You got a stoplight, okay? You're the first one there. Turns red, you sit there, and it turns green, and it takes you too long. In that 0.3 seconds to hit the gas, it takes you too long. Someone behind you just lays on the horn. In that moment, no matter who you are, when someone honks at you, you get mad. Even if you're in the wrong, you're mad. Like, they're honking at you. What about this one? Fast food places like Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, Culver's, they're trying to be creative, and they got the 2 lines. Like 2 lines, everybody knows universal law. You stagger, right? One person goes, the other person goes. Not everybody does that, but it's a universal law, okay? And so you're in the line, you've been waiting forever, it's like Midwest party, Culver's open, so everybody's there, right? And so we're there, and we're staggering. Everybody's staggering until the person in front of you, they don't stagger. It's your turn, they go. You've been waiting for that butter burger all day. You're like, what are you doing? It's my turn. It's universal law. And you're like, I'm a man or woman of Christ. I'm a man or woman of Jesus, but I will lay these holy hands on you, right? You get upset. Everybody has anger. Everybody does. It may play out differently, but here's what, even though we all have anger, nobody wants anger to be a habit that defines them. Your loved ones don't want that to be a habit that defines you. You don't want your boss to be defined by a habit of anger. You don't want anger to be the habit when someone looks at your life and says, that's who they are. So what we want to do is we want to build a habit of not letting anger define you. We want to build a habit of saying, how do I control this? You're going to get angry. You're going to get angry. There are going to be things that make you mad, right? There's going to be things that make you mad. There's going to be people that upset you. But how do I control this? How do I control it? That's what I want to talk about. So I think to control it, we got to ask the question, where does it come from? If I got to control it, where does anger come from? And what's awesome is there's this letter written by a man named James. And James is the brother of Jesus. Now, I heard someone say this once. Imagine your brother is Jesus. You can never live up to that standard, right? Like, no matter how good you do, Jesus always does better, okay? And what would it take for you to believe that your brother was the Savior of the world? Probably have to see him publicly killed and raised from the dead 3 days later, right? Probably something like that. Well, James saw that, and he believed in his brother, right? And James is my favorite letter. It's so practical. It's like, even I can understand it. It's so simple. And in this letter, he says this. He says, what is causing the quarrels and fights among you? It translated, what is causing the battles in your life? What's causing you to fight with other people? And we're like, James, have you been listening? Like, they just spent 15 minutes telling you it's other people, right? It's like, it's the other people. It's my enemies. It's the people I don't like. They're doing all this. If they just didn't do this, then I wouldn't have these fights. And really, what we say is like, James, it's not what is causing the issues. It's who's causing the issues in our life. And we've told you already, the who is out there and the who is in me. It's not me. It's other people. And James is like, oh, okay, great. Then he just ignores us. He says, don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? Oh, hey, James, did I just hear this right? You're blaming me? Have you met my in-laws? Like, they come to my house and they nag, and they're pointing at my grass. Why does my in-laws care more about my grass than I care about my own grass? Like, have you met them? All they do is nag. Have you met my spouse? We've been married for 20 years. We just get on each other's nerves. Have you ever had to work a day at my work? Like, if you had to work with my boss, my goodness, man. James, you wouldn't say this. Have you ever had to deal with the people I have had to deal with? They're the issue. And Jesus is like, no, listen. What causes quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? Isn't it because you left the door cracked? And something got in you? And it's causing war and battle within you, and that war and battle within you is coming out, and all of a sudden you're releasing it on other people. There's desires inside of you. There's anger inside of you. There's chaos inside of you, and it's causing issues. Jesus is like, it's what's going on in here. And that's eerily similar to what his brother said. We looked at this last week, but it applies today. But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from and these defile them. Jesus said the same thing James does. It's what's going on in here. And with anger comes out of us, it's revealing what is stored deep down already in our hearts. It's revealing where we left the door cracked, and where Satan has gotten a foothold in our lives. So he says, don't they come from with what's in you? Jesus says they come from the heart. And anger is this really interesting thing. It's a great revealer of what's going on in our life. If you were to go to a counselor or you were to talk to somebody about anger in the psychology field, they would probably show you or talk to you about a demographic that looks like this, or a picture that looks like this of an iceberg. And everybody knows what an iceberg does, right? We grew up in the Titanic era, so we know that the iceberg is, you can see a little bit on top, but what's really dangerous about an iceberg is what's going on underneath. And anger is the same way. We see anger being outwardly focused. We can tell when someone's angry. We can tell what's going on, but we can't tell what's going on beneath the surface. And often what's going on beneath the surface is what's causing the anger. So here's this demographic. It says icebergs are just floating above, and you can see that. You can see the anger. What we don't see is that someone's embarrassed, that they're scared, that they're frustrated, that they're depressed, that they're distrustful, they're attacked, they're rejected, they're helpless, they're anxious, they're offended, they're insecure, they're hurt, they're worried, they have regret, they're uncomfortable, they're disappointed, disrespected, they have trauma, they have guilt, they have shame. And all of these things are indicators of what's going on, but they reveal itself in our life in anger. So no one else sees these, but we see what's going on. So the question is not, why do I have anger? It's, where is it coming from? Why do I feel that way when someone says something to me? Am I embarrassed? Am I offended? Am I disrespected? Right? You can't disrespect me. Am I annoyed? When this happens, is it because of my grief? Am I overwhelmed? Am I scared it's happening? It's coming out in anger? What's going on? So what we're seeing here is that anger is coming from within us. And then what's funny is when we talk about practically, well, how does it kind of rear its head in our lives? Well, I love what someone said, is that there's two types of people. There are spewers, and there are stewers. So how many of you are brave enough to say you're a spewer? Like when you're angry, it just comes out. That's me, right? Some of us, it just comes out. You know the great thing about spewers is you never have to guess if they're angry. Because they tell you, right? You can see it. They just spew it. It's like the Incredible Hulk. It's like the guy on Inside Out. They light a match and they go crazy and it comes out. It's spewed. And they say whatever they want to say in that moment. And though they may mean it or may not mean it, they're going to say it with such intensity that you're like, where did that come from? And it's going to be mean. It's going to be hurtful. But they spew it. And often with spewers, once it's out, right? Like, it's out. Like, I feel a lot better. No one else feels better, but I feel better. It feels great, right? And then there's stewers. How many of you are stewers? Okay, everybody watch them. They are the dangerous ones. Let me tell you why. They hold on to something that happened in 1986, and they stew on it. But what these type of people do is they get upset, and they get angry as well, but they suppress it. It's like a crock pot, like just pressing it down. And they're actually thinking, while you're sleeping at night, they're thinking ways to hurt you, right? Like, and they're just stewing on it. But you know what eventually happens of a stewer? It explodes too. And it'll be in the most random of times. Like, you'll be married and all of a sudden you'll have a t-shirt on the floor. And that t-shirt will lead to a whole nother fight of a whole nother level. Like, where'd that come from? And they've been holding it in since 1982, right? Like, that's what stewers do. Spewers spew it, stewers stew on it. But the same result. No matter how you show your anger, no matter how it comes out of you, it's from the source of what's going on inside of you. And when it comes to anger, we got to fix or look at what's going on inside of us. But here's what happens, is we have a tendency to just fix the outside. We want to control our explosions. We want to control how we get angry. So now I'm not going to explode on someone. I'm just going to go hit something in my garage, right? Like, we want to control not just what's going on the outside. We want to control fix what's going on in the inside. See, God doesn't just want to fix the outside. God wants to fix what's going on beneath the surface. And I think maybe this is what someone needs to hear. So if you haven't paid attention, this is the point. God is not worried about our checklist behavior modification. He doesn't want us just to follow a checklist and say, hey, do this, and do this, and do this, and do this. And when you get all these checklists, you're good. He's not just concerned about that. You know what he's concerned about? He's concerned about heart transformation. He's concerned about us actually changing who we are at our core. And he's not concerned about us just changing it. He says, I have a future, a plan, a purpose for your life, and I want to have a relationship with you, and I want to change what's going on in here for your best life and for our best relationship together. He's like, I don't want you just to look a certain way. I want to change what's going on in your heart. I want to have some transformation in your life. And you know, when you just try to do behavior modification, when it comes to anything, it doesn't work because eventually you are the common denominator. But when you change who you are at your essence, at your core, at your heart, it changes your life. So God doesn't want us just to change our outward appearance. He wants to change what's going on in our lives. And he wants you to know it's possible to defeat anger. Now you're like, well, no, it's not. Well, yes, it is, right? Here it is. You can't control other people. Anybody know people you don't like? Yeah, right? They do silly, dumb things, right? And they make you mad, right? You can't control that. People are people. You can't control how a situation makes you feel. But you can control how you express your anger. And this has taken me a long journey to get here. I'm not good at it. I can't control certain things, but I can control how I talk to my wife. I can control how I parent my kids. I can control what happens when I'm angry at someone. I can't control what they're doing or how they make me feel, but I can control how I express my anger. And I love what Proverbs says. It says this: starting a quarrel or starting a conflict is like opening a floodgate. So stop before a dispute breaks out. It's like starting a quarrel, like unleashing your anger, starting a fight is like a floodgate. If you're married, you know that. Like, you don't want to go there sometimes because it can open a floodgate of all other issues, right? And sometimes the anger can open so many other issues. So the solution is, if it's going to open it, stop it before a dispute breaks out. So how do we stop it before it breaks out? How do we stop anger before it gets to the surface? And that's what we really want. I'm not telling you never get angry. I'm saying, how do we change it from what's coming out of us? How do we stop before the anger gets to the surface? How do we stop before it opens the floodgates? That's what I'm trying to talk about. So I wish I could give you like, hey, this one big step and do it, but it's more of a process, and these aren't even all the steps, but these are steps I think that you can apply to your life and help you when it comes to anger. First, identify the why behind the anger. Everybody say why. Identify the why. Figure out, why am I getting angry? Why is this happening? When someone does this, why do I feel this way? When someone does this, why do I feel this way? When someone makes fun of me, why do I feel this way? Identifying the anger, because if you can identify the source, you can defeat it. But if you can't figure out, why do I keep getting angry, you're never going to be able to overcome it. It's always going to be something that defines you. And then the second thing you do is consider the cost. Maybe this is where you're at. You know what makes you angry, but you just get angry. You're like, I know why it makes me angry, and that's why I get angry. Consider the cost. And here's what I mean. Every time we give into this impulsion or this emotion to unleash our anger in a negative, mean, manipulative, intimidating, hurtful way, it costs us something. It costs you something in your marriage, in your friendships, at work. It's going to cost you something. And sometimes it may just cost you your peace, right? So the question you have to ask is this: is how I'm going to feel in the 5 seconds after this moment of explosion or stewing worth the cost of the ramifications that this anger is going to unleash? Is it really worth hurting my spouse over? Is it really worth making my kids feel this small about? Is it really worth possibly losing my career? Is it worth ruining this relationship? Consider the cost. And when you consider the cost, if you can just pause and consider the cost, 9 times out of 10, you can be like, it's not worth it. Another way to kind of defeat anger, don't let it control you, is deal with it today. Paul says, don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. You know why he says that? Right? And the old marriage advice is never go to bed angry. There's something to that. And the reason they say that is because the longer you let it linger in your life, the longer you let it in your heart, what does he say? It says it leaves the door crack for Satan to come into your life. The longer it lingers, the longer it's going to create issues. And so he's like, deal with it today. Go confront the person today. Right? You don't have to punch them. I'm not saying that. I'm saying go talk to them. And if it's not worth talking to them, it's probably not worth stealing your peace. If it's not worth dealing with it today, it's probably not worth dealing with it. So don't sit on it because it's going to eat you up. And the other people, when they make you angry, you know what they're doing? They're probably at home eating bonbons anyways. Like, they don't care, right? But it's eating your peace. It's destroying your peace. So deal with it today. And then this. Everybody say change for me. Change your default settings. All of us have default settings when it comes to emotions. Every emotion is a default setting, right? In some capacity. And if you don't know your default setting, look at the person next to you. If they know you, they will tell you very clearly. But we have default settings when someone makes you mad, when someone upsets you, when someone's eating too loud, when someone's eating too slow, when someone's just doing something you don't like. And often our default setting when it comes to anger is to spew on it or stew on it and let it sit, but it eventually comes out of us. So we got to fix it. How do I change my default setting from explosion anger to something else? Because it's difficult and it's hard. But actually, what we have to do is we got to realize the source, consider the cost, not sit on it and say, okay, what am I changing to? And Paul, the Apostle Paul wrote in a letter, he says this: since God chose you to be holy people, holy means to be set apart, right? It's to be different in its own process, to be holy people, to be sanctified people, to be set apart. So God chose us to be set apart. He's like, I want to do something else in your life. You must clothe yourself, so meaning you must put on tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And I read that list, and I'm like, no, thank you. That's what I say, right? I say, I don't know if I can do it. I don't think anybody has ever described me as tender-hearted mercy. I don't think anybody's ever described me as that. Paul's like, listen, this is what you got to clothe yourself with. And I look at this list, and I'm going to be real. I look at this list and I'm like, you know what? I can't do it. I can't do it by myself. I cannot, if it's up to me, clothe yourself with anger, words of death, not humility, not gentleness, and not patience. But luckily for us, the gospel's not about us. None of this is about us. You know how you defeat anger, how you defeat all these habits, these bad habits, is the same source, the same secret. It kind of goes back to we always want to fix the outside, but there's so much more that needs to happen in our lives. See, the Bible tells us we have a high priest, meaning a Savior, who empathizes and sympathizes with us. We have a Savior, Jesus, who is sent in this world, and he understands emotions and temptations, and he understands anger. And there's people who hurt him and would have done things that would have made any of us angry. Matter of fact, and when he's hanging on the cross, when he came there to hang on the cross, and he's being killed by the very people he came to save, you know what he said? He said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. Because he clothed himself with kindness, mercy, tenderness, humility, and gentleness, and patience. He showed us the example. He says, I want to give you the power to do this as well. See, I can't do that in you. I can't do that in me. But Jesus can do that in you. That's how we change. That's how we have heart transformation. That Jesus in our lives, the Holy Spirit continues to work in our lives. And Jesus saying, I'm inviting you to lean on my strength and my power so you don't have to do it by yourself anymore. No longer does anger have to derail you. I can show you a better way. You know you can't do it on your own. You've been trying for so long. You know. But I love you. I got a plan for you. So let me work in your life. That's the secret to defeating anger. And Jesus is inviting us to join him in that. Inviting us to welcome him into our lives. So I'm going to pray. And I'm going to say, if anybody needs to have a conversation, the prayer room is open. You can find me. I would love to talk about this. But I'm going to pray that we invite Jesus into our lives to work in us, to change our hearts, so anger does not have to define us any longer. Let's pray. God, we are so thankful for Jesus, for offering us a better way, for offering us to change us. God, we know we fail on our own, but Father, you never leave us, you never forsake us. You said the enemy came to seek and destroy, but you came to give us life. Father, I pray that we find life in you, we find change in you. God, today as we continue to praise and sing, I pray that your Spirit fills this room. It's in your name we pray. Amen.